lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm giving you a bunch of book recommendations for the upcoming Readathon Monsterathon that is happening for the entirety of September. So the host, Chapter Kate, as well as there are actually quite a few hosts, but this is really her baby, they have suggested kind of putting together a bunch of recommendations, almost like a tag video specific to the prompts for Monsterathon. So that's what I'm doing today, is I'm giving you some recommendations if you are taking part. These are all just books in general that I think are awesome anyway, so even if you're not taking part, hopefully you'll find something new and exciting to read. So let's do this. The first prompt is Classic Creepers, and it is a book that contains a classic horror monster in it. In advance, if you hear some like scuffling in this video, apologies, my rabbits are very excited today and have decided that they want to keep playing with the actual pen itself, so there might be some quite loud banging at some point in this video. Yes, I can see you, little monster. So a classic horror monster villain, and for this one I picked Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. Now this is an absolutely iconic ghost story. It's about an aging rock star who decides to buy a ghost off of eBay, or rather a dead man's suit that claims that it has a ghost attached. He's doing it kind of as a bit of a whim, for a bit of fun. He has a fairly macabre collection of items, and this is something that he's just buying to go with that, but unfortunately for him it actually works, and the ghost does indeed start to haunt him, and it turns out the ghost is a very personal vendetta specifically against Jude. It's an absolutely amazing book, really creepy and just so much fun, and I really think it showcases Joe Hill's writing to the best of his abilities. The next one is What Big Eyes You Have, and this is just reading a monstrously long book. So this is a book that is 400 plus pages. For this one I actually have a particular author rather than a particular book, because generally he writes fairly beefy books, and that is Walter Moers. So here I have the first one in his Zirmonia series, which is the 30½ Lives of Captain Blueberry novel, and here we have Rumo and His Miraculous Adventures. Both of these push well over the 600 page mark, and as you can see in comparison to my head, they are about double the average size of a paperback. These are monstrous books when it comes to their length, but they are also absolutely fantastic. They're very much that kind of absurdist fantasy style, very similar to Terry Pratchett, and they follow two characters. So this one follows Captain Blue Bear, and this one follows Rumo. Captain Blue Bear is a blue bear. Rumo is a Wolperting, which is like a fighting dog, but who is sentient, and it follows their crazy adventures through the world of Zirmonia, bumping into some really fantastic characters. I adore these books. I think Walter Moers is a fantastic author, so I would really heavily recommend these if you are a fan of that like slightly zany, wacky fantasy series, and you are happy to like withstand the amount of book that is here. The next one is a chimera or cross-genre book, a book that would technically fit into multiple genres. For that I have A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. Now this is technically a fantasy book because, as the name suggests, it does indeed focus around dragons, which do not exist in our world, funnily enough. However, it does it so much in the style of like your classic nature writing books, and indeed classic memoir, that I really feel like this is kind of going across genre. It's clearly not non-fiction, but it's very much written in that style of non-fiction, and I really appreciated it. It was such a down-to-earth, naturalistic look at the concept of dragons, rather than it being all sort of like magic systems and all sorts of woo, and we'll ride on the back of them, and I absolutely adored it. This series is really a firm favourite on BookTube. This is book 1 of 5. I've read 2 of them and I think they're just brilliant. The next one is The Real Monsters, and that's books about monstrous human beings. Now I did kind of rack my brains and have a look on my shelves on non-fiction because of course real monsters being kind of monstrous human beings, but I don't generally read that much true crime, so instead I have an author for you who writes some truly monstrous people. That author is Poppy Zebright. Now I've got The Lost Souls here and I've got Exquisite Corpse over here. They are both kind of horror books, mainly set in New Orleans, I think. This one's about a serial killer. Yeah, they're both set in New Orleans, and this one is kind of a bit of a vampire spoof, but not really. Basically, Poppy Zebright is very good at writing that real kind of like body gore, body horror type vibe. These are really gruesome, disgusting books that just really tick that box if you are keen on horror that really goes for kind of the almost like torture porn elements. They're not necessarily my cup of tea. I read both of these a good few years ago now, and I haven't picked up a Poppy's Eve right since, but she really does write some absolutely horrendously monstrous human beings who do some pretty twisted things to each other, and like all of the characters in her books are all a bit messed up. So if you are keen on that kind of thing, I think you'll really enjoy these. And nobody ever talks about her, so I wanted to mention her as kind of a bit of an oddball one that you might want to try. Then we have Unsightly, and you need to read a graphic novel with a monster of some sort in it. For that I have Revival Volume 1, although I have read all the way up to Volume 3. This is a rural noir by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton, and is basically set in a rural town, a rural town in kind of Northern America, and it is about what would happen if the dead came back to life. Not so much as zombies, but just kind of came back to life, and it's in this very, very specific isolated town. It is playing off the concept of a zombie, which is why I think, you know, these are almost like monsters, but not quite, and we're not really 100% certain of what is happening. There is also a very, very spooky kind of white, monstrous, partially alien looking creature that features quite heavily in the graphic novel from almost the beginning as well, so I'm including that in for this one. I really love this graphic novel series. I think it is so powerful and emotive, and I think it really plays with conceptions of like life and death, and genuinely playing out what would happen if something like a zombie apocalypse or the dead did genuinely come back to life, what that would be like, and how the media would handle it, and how social media would handle it, and how all of these different sort of everyday components of our life would interact with it. And I think they're just absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic is very much the buzzword for this particular video. So the next two I'm actually doing slightly differently because I couldn't think of anything that naturally fits the prompts. So the next prompt is Angry Mob, and it is pick a book that's been recommended to you by more than one person. Now I'm actually going almost like the reverse of that, and I'm going to recommend you a bunch of books, or a particular author actually, who I think should be being recommended to more people because they are absolutely phenomenal at doing monstrous horror, terrifying things, and that is Adam Neville. Now I've read two of Adam Neville's books. I've read Apartment 16 and The Last Days, and both of them terrified the absolute pants off of me. They were horrifically scary, and I really think he's one of these absolutely underappreciated horror writers who should be up there with like Josh Malerman and a bunch of the kind of other really quintessential horror books out there. His stuff just has this real like creepy edge to it. Apartment 16 is about a particular apartment, funnily enough number 16, in a kind of apartment complex, and it's a security guard who something weird is happening there, specifically with the paintings there. It's almost like a portal to another world. And then Last Days is about a cult, and it's about a movie maker who is attempting to make a documentary about this particular cult, but every time he tries to get closer to it, people keep dying around him, and there are these weird sounds and unexplained things on his footage that he can't account for, and it is genuinely just like spine, like blood-chillingly terrifying. An amazing author, more people need to read him, and I can't read him anymore because I get night terrors, which is such a shame. The next one is Sacrifice, and it's a book that has been featured in somebody's unhaul video. Now I don't really watch unhauls, I don't particularly enjoy them, so I really struggle with this one. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend you a book that I nearly unhauled, last minute decided not to, and I'm really pleased because it's now become one of my favourites, and that is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. I very nearly got rid of this, and then I read it towards the kind of middle of the year, and I absolutely adored it. Kate Atkinson is potentially one of my new favourite authors out there. I think her work is absolutely amazing, and this is such a weird, funky, quirky kind of book, and basically it's following this woman all throughout her life, and there are multiple points in her life where she should have technically died, but what happens is the kind of clock gets rewound and she gets to redo that particular incident and end up basically not dying, and it is kind of this weird like repeated sense of close calls and missed opportunities, and it's just so much fun, and it's set in the backdrop of the Second World War, and it's absolutely riveting and fascinating. It wasn't the strongest ending and wasn't the strongest beginning, and I think with something like this where you are relying on that gimmick, the beginning and the end are going to be really difficult to carry off, but Kate Atkinson's writing is just glorious and wonderful and rich and emotive, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a cool concept, so I definitely recommend this, and I'm so pleased I didn't actually unhaul it like I was planning to. The next one, so for this readathon there are actually 3 different teams. There's the Beasts, the Haunts and the Conspiracies. I'm team Beasts, not that that's important for this particular video, but just wanted to let you know. We each have a different prompt attached to our team. So for the Beasts, it is a book that has a monster that has plant or animal traits in it, and I actually have 2 for you here. So the first one is The Girl with All the Gifts, and this is a zombie horror book, but it has a little bit of a kind of twist to it, because the way that the people become zombies is because of a fungus that kind of takes over your brain and then gives you quite a lot of plant-like elements to you. This particular fungus in the book is actually a genuinely real fungus that currently takes over insects. It was featured on a documentary with David Attenborough a while ago. It's probably been on numerous nature documentaries, because it is genuinely terrifying. Like, it takes over the host's brain and climbs super high on a tree, and then will like make their head explode, and in doing so it will send out a bunch of spores, and that's how it continues. So M.R. Carey, the author, is just basically doing a bit of a thought experiment of like what would happen if this crossed over into humanity basically and became a human strain. It's wonderful fun, like a really nice twist on the zombie classic, but also has some of the like quintessential features of a zombie apocalypse book that we all know and love. So I really think it's such a strong book. It's actually a duology. I've got the boy with all the boy on the bridge somewhere up here, and I do think the second one isn't quite as strong, but I did love some of the plant elements. And then for like more of an animal and actually I guess kind of insect vibe, I'm recommending The Beetle by Richard Marsh. This is Dracula meets the Mummy, which really, do you need to know any more than that? It's absolutely fantastic. It actually came out the same time as Dracula, the exact same year, and it is baffling to me that this one has fallen by the wayside of kind of history, whereas Dracula has become the iconic book that we know and love today. Don't get me wrong, I love Dracula, but this is just better. Like, it's just better. It follows a very similar story. It is this weird, terrifying creature that comes across from ancient lands, and in doing so starts to terrorize a young woman, and there has to be kind of a band of men who try and save her, because of course this creature though is kind of a weird beetle type thing. It can basically turn into a terrifying scarab beetle. It's really cool, really good fun, and very fast. Okay, the next one is for the haunts, and this is books that feature the dead or the undead, and I have again a couple of recommendations, all of them focusing around the concept of dead. So for fiction, I'm actually going to recommend Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Now I know people are thinking like, Emma, that's not really a monstrous book now, is it? And I agree with you, but there is like the kind of one of the main characters in the book is dead for the entire length of the book, and it is the first wife in this book, and I really think that she plays the first wife, Rebecca, and I really think that she plays such a strong character through it, and she is such a pivotal, she almost has a presence in the book, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's like a real classic, almost like noir kind of vibe. It's spooky and creepy in a way that I think that really encapsulates where horror then ended up going. And it's not a horror book in the slightest, it's barely even a thriller, but it is just fantastic, and it really plays with the idea of like the dead still having power. So I would highly recommend it. For non-fiction, again still talking about the dead, there is the absolute queen of non-fiction writing when it comes to the topic of death, and that would be Caitlin Doughty, who is amazing, and if you haven't read her books yet, you really should. So we have her first one here, which is The Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and this is, so Caitlin Doughty is basically a mortician, and this is her autobiography of her training for how to work as a mortician in a crematorium, and it's also interspersed with information about the American funeral structure and system. And then her second book, From Here to Eternity, is her travelling the globe and meeting different cultures and how they deal with the concept of death. Again, just fascinating, and I really feel like with all of these kind of horror books that do talk about death and the idea of, you know, beyond the grave being something terrifying, something like this which actually looks at how different cultures understand the concept of death and it not being as scary as we definitely view it to be in Western society, is really eye-opening and really interesting. So I would definitely recommend these. I know they're not quite in the spirit of the Monsterathon, but like, I think they both have their own merits. And then the final prompt is The Conspiracies, and this is a book that contains aliens, robots, sci-fi elements in general, and again I have two for you. Now, one that is going to be mentioned by a lot of people for very good reason is The Themis Files by Sylvain Nouveau. I can't remember the name of the first one, I'll chuck it up here. I think it's maybe Sleeping Giants. It's basically about a young girl who finds a giant robotic hand buried like deep in the earth when she's little, and then when she becomes older as a scientist she gets to study it, and it turns out it's connected with far more and becomes one giant robot. The trilogy then continues from there, and it's fascinating and very cool. It has lots of science and military stuff and linguistics and a bunch of whole other topics, which is awesome. It's also told exclusively in like interviews and reports and like news reporting and things like that. So because of that, I'd actually really recommend it on audiobook. It has a full cast on audiobook and it is absolutely amazing. They do so well with accents and sound effects and a whole bunch of things like that. It's borderline a whole play in its own right, and it's absolutely wonderful. If you do like the idea of kind of the robotics and almost like AI, artificial intelligence concepts, there is also the Demimonde series by Rod Rees. This is about almost like a video game which the government created to kind of war game different scenarios, and they have created artificial intelligences that are supposed to represent various horrendous human beings throughout history, and then they are kind of playing out what would happen. But unfortunately something's gone terribly wrong and the programming was too good, and in doing so they've become sentient and they are causing problems from beyond the computer screen, and they've kidnapped the president's daughter. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. So they're sending in a young agent to try and rescue the president's daughter in like a covert mission, and it is absolutely amazing fun. She runs into characters like Genghis Khan and like Hermann Goering, and it's completely wild and crazy and fantastic, and I would really recommend it because it is playing around with, like, even though it's about artificial intelligence and technically I guess robotics and sci-fi, it's also got a bit of a weird like historical fiction vibe to it because you are being sucked into this virtual reality. Very, very, very cool. So that is it from me for this video. These are a whole bunch of recommendations for the Monsterathon prompts and just generally a bunch of really cool books that I think that you should check out. Are you doing Monsterathon? If so, what's your team and are you super psyched? So yeah, leave everything in the comments down below and I will chat to you soon. Bye!